It started with a smirk and a line no one saw coming. "You're probably the only one at CNN who's glad I recovered." Joe Rogan wasn't joking, and Sanjay Gupta knew it. When the chief medical correspondent of CNN walked into Rogan's studio back in 2021, it wasn't just a guest appearance, it was a showdown. One that would end with an uncomfortable truth and a network's credibility on the line. Rogan, long critical of what he sees as performative outrage in modern media, wasn't about to let this moment slip by. Not after CNN accused him of taking horse medication on national television. Not after they framed him as reckless. This was his chance to hit back with receipts. And what followed wasn't just tense, it was legendary. Joe's calm, relentless questioning left Gupta squirming, cornered by Rogan's logic and the weight of his own network's narrative. It was a viral moment, one that cracked open a much bigger conversation about trust, spin, and the crumbling facade of legacy media. But here's the twist. This wasn't even the most explosive moment to ever go down on Rogan's show. We're diving into two of the most intense, culture-shaking showdowns to ever hit the mic, from CNN's embarrassment to a fiery clash between controversial author Graham Hancock and skeptical archaeologist Flint Dibble. Before we get into it, make sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications for more deep dives like this. And let me ask you, if a news outlet lied about you on air, would you sit back or confront them face to face? The year was 2021, and tensions around public health were reaching a boiling point. So when Dr. Sanjay Gupta, CNN's lead medical expert, showed up on the Joe Rogan Experience, it felt like two opposing worlds colliding in real time. Gupta's appearance wasn't just unexpected, it was rare. It's not often you see a mainstream media heavyweight step into Rogan's domain, where long-form conversation rules and spin doesn't stand a chance. And the stakes? Oh, they were sky high. Just weeks earlier, Joe had publicly revealed he contracted the virus and that he treated it with a cocktail of medications, including ivermectin prescribed by his doctor, but the media, and especially CNN, didn't exactly offer him a balanced portrayal. Instead, headlines exploded with mockery. Segments aired painting him as reckless, even dangerous. They insinuated he'd gone full cowboy, chugging livestock meds like he raided a tack shop. No context, no clarification, just endless spins. So when Sanjay sat across from Joe, the air was thick with anticipation, and Joe, he came prepared. Without raising his voice or making it personal, Rogan began peeling back the layers calmly, strategically. He wasn't out for blood. He was out for the truth. It should bother you. They lied. Rogan wasn't shouting. He wasn't flustered. He was stating facts. And for once, Sanjay Gupta didn't have a prepared script or edited segment to fall. Back on dot, Joe brought up a tweet. The FDA posted a smug, sarcastic jab that read, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it." It was meant to be funny, but Joe wasn't laughing. "This is a medication that's been prescribed to billions of people," he said. "A drug whose inventor won a Nobel Prize, so why the smear?" And Gupta, trying to keep his composure, was clearly caught off guard. This wasn't a hit piece. This wasn't a debate stage. This was Joe's house, and the truth had nowhere to hide. What made the moment so unforgettable wasn't just the confrontation, it was the way Joe guided it. Focused, surgical. And then came the question that stopped everything cold. "Does it bother you that your network lied?" Gupta paused, fumbled, tried to change the subject. But Rogan kept going, not with anger but persistence. "You're the medical guy," Joe said. "You didn't ask. You didn't push back." Eventually Gupta admitted it. They shouldn't have said that. And just like that, the house of cards started to wobble. But that wasn't even the most revealing part. Not by a long shot. Stick around, because what CNN did after the podcast aired said more than any apology ever could. After the episode dropped, you'd think CNN might take a moment to reflect, to acknowledge the exchange, maybe even own up to their misstep, but instead, they did what they always do best: cut, spin, reframe. In a follow-up segment aired on their network, CNN showed snippets of Gupta's podcast appearance, only this time it was their edit, carefully trimmed, softened at the edges, and sprinkled with light jabs at Joe's credibility. The moment everyone was talking about, the direct confrontation about the ivermectin story, mysteriously missing instead. The network leaned into the usual narrative. Joe Rogan, the controversial podcaster, dabbling in misinformation. Again. Gupta himself even downplayed the entire exchange afterward, describing Joe's arguments as mental gymnastics. It was a bold move, one that backfired spectacularly. The public had already seen the full episode. Millions of views, unfiltered footage, the raw, honest back and forth, and no amount of selective editing could undo what people saw with their own eyes. a mainstream medical expert, cornered into admitting his network misled the public and had no real defense. And from that point forward, something shifted. CNN didn't just criticize Rogan, they targeted him. Articles began appearing with a thin veil of professionalism, but the subtext was loud and clear. This man is dangerous, his influence a threat, his platform a problem. Rogan, however, wasn't rattled. If anything, the firestorm only fueled him further as CNN's ratings took a nosedive. The Joe Rogan Experience soared, becoming not just the most popular podcast in the US, but the most listened to audio show on the planet. Joe didn't need a studio newsroom. He had something far more powerful: trust. And yet, believe it or not, that interview with Sanjay Gupta was tame compared to what was coming next, because when Graham Hancock and Flint Dibble clashed on Joe's show, all bets were off. And what unfolded wasn't just a disagreement. It was a philosophical collision between two worlds, in one of the most intense debates Joe's studio had ever witnessed. Stay tuned, because it's about to get wild. You could feel it coming from the first minute. Graham Hancock, the best-selling author known for challenging mainstream history, sat calmly in the studio, a man used to controversy, accusations, and being dismissed as fringe. But across from him was Flint Dibble, a professional archaeologist, armed with credentials, citations, and the backing of an entire academic establishment. It was the intellectual equivalent of a live wire meeting gasoline, the tension palpable. What kicked it off wasn't just Graham's theory that an advanced civilization may have existed during the Ice Age, wiped out by catastrophe but not before leaving behind traces of knowledge shared with ancient peoples. No. What truly sparked the flames was what happened after Netflix gave Hancock a global platform. His docuseries Ancient Apocalypse exploded in popularity. Millions watched, debates ignited online, and the archaeological community. They went ballistic. Flint and his colleagues didn't just disagree. They accused Hancock of something far more serious. In an open letter endorsed by the Society for American Archaeology, a group with thousands of members, they claimed Hancock's work empowered extreme voices, promoted false historical narratives, and perpetuated ideas laced with misogyny, racism, and worse. Let that sink in. They weren't just questioning his evidence, they were branding him a cultural threat. And Joe? He gave Graham the space to respond, not with rage, but with cold clarity. You throw those labels at someone, and you're painting a target on their back. That's what Hancock said, almost matter-of-factly, staring down decades of pushback. Because this wasn't his first rodeo, but the stakes had never been this high. Sitting in front of the camera, Graham explained how the letter felt like an orchestrated effort to discredit not just his work, but him as a person. And when Joe pulled up the actual document live on air, things escalated quickly. You want Netflix to slap a disclaimer on my show? To classify it as science fiction? That's not debate. That's censorship dressed in polite academic language. Flint, to his credit, tried to keep his cool. But you could see the frustration creeping in. Then came the jab. You're more of a celebrity than I am, he told Hancock, as if public interest invalidated the argument. Graham didn't flinch. Joe didn't jump in. But the silence said everything. And then it got personal, because when Graham brought up how other pioneers, scientists, and researchers once mocked by institutions were later proven right, Flint snapped back. The tone shifted, the smiles faded, and the debate turned into a battle for intellectual survival. Neither side gave an inch. But one thing was clear: the conversation was real, raw, and needed. It wasn't about who won. It was about something deeper: the public's right to hear every side, even the ones academia wants buried. And that honesty, that refusal to conform to the usual gatekeeping, that's what makes Joe Rogan's platform so powerful. He doesn't filter uncomfortable ideas. He throws them on the table and says, let's talk. But believe it or not, even that explosive episode still wasn't the most intense clash Joe's had on the mic, because there's one more showdown that sent shockwaves through the culture war, and it left everyone speechless. Stick around, you don't want to miss what happened next. Some episodes make you think, others stir controversy, but every so often, one completely shatters the illusion. That's exactly what happened during the now infamous exchange between Joe Rogan and CNN's Sanjay Gupta, an interview that became a symbol for a much deeper crisis. Media credibility in the age of transparency. Joe didn't set out to embarrass anyone. He didn't come in swinging with conspiracy theories or rage. He simply asked questions, pulled up the receipts, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. It was calm, it was brutal, and it was impossible to spin. And that's the part the media elite still can't wrap their heads around. That one man with a mic, no teleprompter. And a 3-hour conversation can expose more truth than a week's worth of primetime headlines. But let's not forget, Gupta's exchange was just one act in a much bigger story. When Graham Hancock and Flint Dibble faced off, it was a reminder that even in academia, ideology often comes dressed as evidence, that the gatekeepers aren't always protecting truth. Sometimes they're guarding their turf. And Joe, he doesn't care what team you're on, he's not interested in taking sides. He's interested in getting to the heart of the matter, even if it means making powerful people squirm. That's what separates him. That's why his podcast dominates the globe. Not because he's always right, but because he's not afraid of being wrong in the open. In a time when mainstream platforms carefully curate every second, Joe invites chaos because that's where the real stuff lives. In the unpolished, unscripted, unfiltered mess of honest conversation. And maybe that's what scares the establishment the most, because when people start thinking for themselves, when they hear both sides without the spin, the old game stops working. So what do you think? Was Joe out of line? Or was this exactly the kind of accountability we need more of? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And tell me if someone twisted the truth about you on national TV. Would you stay quiet or call them out face to face? Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.